Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 4th of April, and I hope it's been a beautiful Tuesday where you are. Anytime you want to listen to your weather information from the National Weather Service, we're just a phone call away at 1-800-472-0391. You can find us online where you are with high bandwidth and low bandwidth options, stuff with pretty pictures and stuff with just the text. Whatever you need where you are in Alaska, we've got a web service that will help you out. If you can't find what you're looking for at weather.gov/Alaska, weather.gov/Fairbanks, weather.gov/Juneau, or weather.gov/Anchorage, let me know at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. That'll hit all of the TV weather team, and we're happy to help you find what you're looking for online or on social media anytime, as well as just answer some basic weather questions or take a look at that pretty weather picture and tell you what you're looking at there and maybe even feature it on the show. So send me a picture from your village. We'd love to see it. Here's a look at what's going on across southeastern Alaska tonight, across the outer southeastern coastline, including places like Craig. You're dealing with some strong and gusty winds. Could see gusts upwards of 65 miles per hour tonight. This will go until about 4 o'clock in the morning as those winds are coming in pretty stiffly from the south. This is all part of that low pressure system sitting across the Gulf of Alaska as those winds continue to rake over the outer coast. The worst of it should stay very close to the outer coast, and you'll have some stronger gusts on the inside. Storm force winds are expected as we get into the next couple days as well. If not at storm force, probably fairly close to that. So watch what you see here in the Marines in just a little bit. South Central looking pretty good. Southwest, no problems there. Let's go up north, and we have wind also as an issue for the upper Koyukuk Valley, as well as many areas across the middle Yukon Valley. It's mainly going to be the higher terrain, though, and we're talking about winds from the east about 20 to 30 miles per hour, gusts to 40 miles per hour. So at times, if that gets a piece of snow or blows a few things around, don't be too surprised. That'll last through the overnight hours and into tomorrow morning. And for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, a blowing snow advisory is in effect. There is enough snow, we think, that it could be blown around and will reduce visibility. So that's the difference between the wind advisory and the blowing snow advisory. Simply a matter of lower visibility. And that is expected to continue overnight and into early tomorrow morning. So easterly winds, an issue. Southerly winds down south, an issue. Mainly it's a wind problem thanks to a big low across the Gulf of Alaska. Let's see if you can use your weather skills and find it today. Here we go. Yeah. There's low pressure sitting right about here, and this is working its way northward. We've got another surge that's already moved its way inland, and this overall southeast to southwesterly or northwesterly progression is continuing that wind machine across southeast and the central and western interior and the north slope. So more to come for that, sure. Rain has been building in across the southern parts of southeast today. Again, that high wind warning across the outer southern coast through the evening and overnight hours. Across south central, mild conditions continue as you would expect, and in fact so mild in southeast today. How mild was it? Nearly 60 degrees in places like Petersburg. 59 was the actual high temperature. Pretty impressive stuff, and very mild where many folks are in southeast. Now for the north slope, that moisture has been building in, building north and building west, but we still have a north and westerly component across the west coast and the Alaska Peninsula. Because of that, we're watching for some strong and occasional gusts through the gaps there in the Alaska Peninsula, and you know where those special places are. If it usually gets windy when the weather's active in the east, well, this will be one of those nights there where the winds could be blowing where you are. We've seen some periods of rainfall across south central and southwest. Occasional blowing snow again across the Beaufort Seacoast, with those blowing snow advisories still in effect through the overnight hours. But overall, you can see that trough of low pressure is really taking hold of a large part of the 49th state out to the west. a weaker area of low pressure across the western Bering with a little bit of high pressure thrown in just for fun. Some stable or low clouds there across the Pribilofs. Here's a look at the weather map now. A 972 millibar low just south and west of Haida Gwaii. There's another circulation out across the west, and this broad circulation here keeps grabbing pieces and pulling them into that flow. So we keep getting some stronger impulses wrapped into this overall circulation. This will kind of swing its way around into south central and southwestern Alaska. And then on the back side is that colder flow working its way down off the Bering Sea, occasionally bringing low clouds and some light snow across Unalaska and Dutch Harbor to places like False Pass and Cold Bay. Ammonok, Nunivak Island, the southwestern Capes, all looking at a few passing areas of light snow. And then snow and blowing snow for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Most of that seems to be blowing around Kaktovik. And then a little burst of some cooler weather working its way eastward, and a very small ridge of high pressure out across the Bering Sea. Tonight's forecast shows the front working its way north and east, and as we like to talk about all these black lines, those are isobars and lines of constant pressure. If you're used to looking at a map, then you can probably identify where the wind is going to be. We'll help you in here. As these lines kind of get pushed closer together, that change in pressure from one geographic place to the next, if that's a really tight change, the wind's going to have to blow an awful lot to make that possible, just for pure physics fun there. It's got to work out mathematically, and that's how we do it. So in this case, the wind is going to equalize, just as you would see a water rushing down a valley. A very steep valley would have faster moving water, and more of a gentle sloping terrain, well, the water wouldn't flow so quickly. Well, this is a very steep valley right here. And this is a very steep valley, not quite as steep as what you see here. This hill would be harder to climb. This hill, maybe a little bit easier. When you get in those steep locations, that's where that wind is just roaring through. And so we would expect to see wind really going strong across parts of outer southeastern coastline tonight, especially the southern outer coast there around Craig and Klawock. Now up north, blowing snow. Once again, we find ourselves with a fairly steep slope of pressure. And blowing snow could be the issue there. Watch for that to continue through the nighttime hours. Out across the west, our northerly winds bringing some snow showers down across the western Cape. Still cold enough here across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. And another little impulse across the western chain, bringing some snow showers there. Rainfall expected for most of the northern and western Gulf, as includes Kodiak Island, with periods of rain there at 967 millibars. 970 by Wednesday. Our front is falling apart. What does that mean? Well, not a whole lot as far as really sizable or detectable weather, but that temperature difference is finally mixing out enough that we're not going to notice a huge wind shift or a big temperature change as that moves ashore. The one thing that does do is it takes away that focus from this broad area along this boundary here for a more enhanced lift that builds more clouds, that builds perhaps a better chance for rain or more intense rain or snow. So southeast will probably become a little more showery in nature as we get into Wednesday. The winds will shift a little bit more across south central, but notice Cook Inlet and most of the region here west of the Kenai Mountains stays fairly dry. We still have a colder flow coming across the west coast, snow showers there, rain showers for Adak and Atka. And up north, well, clouds will break a little bit more across the upper Koyukuk Valley. The winds may still be an issue across the middle Yukon and upper Yukon Valley and south of the Brooks Range and across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. We still have our crossed arrows there indicating that blowing snow is a possibility. For Thursday, look at that. The pressure gradient has eased up. We're now into a gentle rolling hill, if not a plain, for southeastern Alaska and the Panhandle and into the Gulf. But here's our steep slope once again across the north and western Gulf, 979 millibars there. The pressure level is filling or rising, so it's not as deep as it once was, but it's still a decent little circulation across southwest and Bristol Bay, where periods of rain and snow showers may be possible, as well as some gusty winds across the Alaska Peninsula. Low pressure setting up across the eastern interior around Eagle and just east of Fairbanks. That could keep some snow showers in the region. Just north of that, a generally clear sky, but with some blowing snow and wind across the Arctic coast. And out west, our little disturbance has grown into something a little more put together and dressed up and ready for Thursday. 990 millibar low there across the western Bering, pushing a front through the central chain. That'll change the winds around to more of a westerly direction and pick them up a bit. Watch for periods of rainfall and generally poor visibility as that's passing through. Otherwise, a drier sky for Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, maybe up to the Pribilofs. Maybe you'll be able to look off the coast and see the ice that's getting closer to home. Temperature-wise today, as we said, some places in southeast really outdid themselves. Petersburg, I believe, made it up to at least 59 degrees. Maybe you're up to 60 this hour. 54 as you get out toward Angoon, 54 for the capital city today, 48 for Sitka, and mid to upper 40s at least for Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock. Again, with a little bit of rainfall there, you were cooling temperatures down, but Petersburg really soared above and beyond today. 46 looks like for Cordova. It was lower 40s for Valdez. Anchorage today, if it felt balmy, that was why. 46 in Homer, 42 for Seward, 41 in Kenai, 51 wonderful, beautiful degrees in Talkeetna. Hope you enjoyed that. 50 around Chittenden, and 46 in Gulkana, 49 degrees in Fairbanks and Eagle today. So beautiful weather was had in many more places northward than yesterday. 33 in Fort Yukon. It was 26 in Arctic Village, 21 degrees in Anaktuvik Pass, single digits for the Beaufort Seacoast, sub-zero there as you got down toward Wainwright, but Kotzebue Sound temps were back in the 20s and 30s. Wales hit 19, 32 around Nome. It was 27 in Gamble. Ammonok and many of the villages northward still in the upper 20s into Norton Sound and Unalakleet. 43 degrees around Russian Mission, 44 from McGrath. It was 31 in Bethel. Lake Iliamna was 42. And 30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula. We had a few spots down the coast in the 20s, 32 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. St. Paul and St. George both held in the lower 20s today and nearing 40 degrees for Adak, Aka, and Shemya. Now, as we go into overnight low temperatures, look for readings in the lower to mid 30s for most of south central and southwest. Kodiak 38, low to mid 40s for many in southeast. A windy, wet night for you, but still mild. Mid 20s for the middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks. The south slopes of the Brooks Range in the single digits. Sub-zero for the Arctic coast, 22 in Nome, 25 or so for Bethel, and 21 in St. Paul, with temps in the Aleutians back in the low 30s. Highs tomorrow back nearing 40 degrees for the west. For the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s there, 26 in St. Paul and St. George, low 40s around Bristol Bay. Looks like the YK Delta and many around the Bethel region back in the mid to upper 30s. Unalakleet, you're at 33, 1 degree warmer in Nome. St. Lawrence Island, mid 20s. Kotzebue Sound, mostly in the 20s and 30s. A few northern locations up around Point Hope, and then northward, probably in the teens for most of the day, and mid 40s around the middle Tanana Valley. Upper 40s for south central and the Anchorage region, Cook Inlet. Prince William Sound also in the mid to upper 40s in southeast, upper 40s to lower 50s there with that stronger southeasterly push. On to flying weather now, and your aviation concerns. IFR conditions for the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, Bristol Bay, and the Bering Coast, probably for the Alaska Peninsula, and a large part of Kodiak Island. MVFR conditions start in the central and northern parts of the Panhandle and a large part of Prince William Sound. As we get into the afternoon, some improvements in the Sound, but look at IFR across the inland area, so be careful about that, as well as some areas around northern parts of southeast with MVFR through a large part of the Panhandle, the North Slope missing Barrow by the afternoon, and parts of the YK Delta and Bristol Bay back under IFR. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR through most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass could lean over toward IFR as the day goes on. Rainy Pass right now looks to be pretty good at VFR, but changes happening in Windy Pass by the afternoon to MVFR. VFR conditions for Isabel Pass are expected. Mentasta Pass looking okay so far. Tanita Pass, VFR to MVFR as the day goes on. And Portage Pass, we expect to see IFR pretty broad across the morning hours, but then leaning up against the inland areas as we get through the afternoon on the east side. And Chilkoot and White Pass leaning over toward IFR as the day goes on with a start at MVFR for many. Freezing levels has that warm, wet air working its way up across the eastern and northern Gulf and inland across south central and west of the Alaska Range. The surface freezing line is just south of the Alaska Peninsula and just north of most of southeastern Alaska. So you can see that influence of that warm and wet air showing up here at the freezing level chart as well. Anytime you want to check this out, you can do that at weather.gov/Anchorage/TV. The icing potential has light to isolated moderate across many Gulf Coast communities, generally above 5,000 to 6,000 feet across the north and west, and then 7,000 feet for most of southeast and the central and northern parts of the Yukon. And then out across the west for the Bering Strait communities above about 2,000 feet. And once again, most of that should be light to isolated moderate. Our jet stream has indications of our superhighway of weather. What's the steering current? This is the chart we use. You can see that powerful flow coming across the North Pacific at 150 to 165 knots and then taking a bend northward with Pacific moisture and heat and moving that into the eastern Gulf. A branch of that breaks off, and that's what we're seeing snake its way into south central and the interior now with that heat, with high pressure helping to pull that northward even more into our western community. So watch for some changes there. Southerlies aloft working out of the Bering Sea will eventually come crashing back down as they work their way into the north and eastern parts of Alaska. But for right now, it's the southerly influence that's really driving most of the weather around our state. You can see that here at 9,000 feet, a broad southerly flow with wind speeds from 45 to 50 knots or so across the eastern Gulf, and then combining into a stronger singular flow across the northern Gulf and then slowing down once it works its way around the back side of this weather system, 15 to about 35 knots coming across Bristol Bay. A broad easterly flow sweeping down the Yukon Valley, and that's helping to stir up the winds at the surface as well. You can see the winds across the Arctic coast, 20 to 35 from the east. Still blowing fairly stoutly from the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast there, about 30 to 40 knots. Our easterlies continue across the Yukon Valley, and then you see our southerlies are back at it here across the eastern Gulf, 40 to 60 knots here at their strongest. Winds diminishing a little bit across parts of southeast at 3,000 feet as we head into the morning hours at this level tomorrow, but probably not at the surface initially. Northwesterlies working across the Bering Sea, anywhere from 15 to about 25, again helping to focus some gap winds through the range there, and a very light southeasterly flow for the western chain thanks to a very minimal area of high pressure across the western Bering. Here's a look at your turbulence chart. We are going to watch for some low-level wind shear and probably some turbulence issues across southeast and the coastal sections of the northern Gulf and western Gulf, generally below 12,000 feet. That's a pretty broad height designation there, but there is going to be a lot of wind moving through this region, so watch for some thumps and bumps if you're moving in and out of south central or southeast tomorrow, and along the Yukon Valley where we're having those strong easterly winds in the upper Koyukuk as well. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather and a sea ice update in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
This is the third year of our project. We're looking at the timing of when all the plants start growing in the summer and when all the birds come to this area. The timing of when those things happen is changing with climate change. And so we're looking at the effects of those changes. The relationship with people you work with at a camp like this is really unique. In my everyday life, I don't spend this much time with anyone, with a spouse, family members, best friends.
This is a really interesting situation where you're basically thrown into the mix with essentially a bunch of strangers.
It's kind of a really cool way to get to know people because you're pretty stripped down to bare minimum. We don't have internet, we don't have phones or anything, and so all of our social interactions are just like face-to-face personal interactions.
I'm an undergrad exchange student from Sweden.
My name is Ryan Choi, and I am a PhD student at Utah State University.
I'm a postdoctoral researcher at University of Alaska Anchorage.
I'm an undergraduate researcher and field technician from Utah State University.
And I'm a master's student at Utah State University.
And I'm here now in the YK Delta to work for the summer.
Our field season is about 5 months long. We have to show up here at the tail end of winter. Everything is totally frozen. All the rivers are frozen over, there's snow everywhere, and it's a very different landscape than it looks like right now.
Our day-to-day life here, it varies quite a bit, but the one constant is that we make a hearty and sometimes elaborate breakfast. Our downtime is almost entirely dictated by the weather. So if the weather's nasty, we're inside and we can get really creative.
If you're looking at your paper and you fold it bottom to top, what might be considered hot dog style in the past life is now valley fold.
Valley fold, okay.
You get valley fold.
It feels like I live better out here than I do back home. When I lived in Anchorage, I was totally deprived of sauna for the whole winter. It was like, yeah. Then I come out here and there's these great saunas. I do not take any credit for the construction of this sauna. It's entirely the bird camp who has put up the sauna and made these little niceties. We have the essential oils that you can put on the splash on the stove with water. So this is where you sit and get reborn.
Remote research camps like this are common in Alaska, and I think part of it is because in other parts of the world or other parts of the country, they'd be on the road system, they'd be easy to get to. But the other thing is that Alaska is unique because it's the only part of our country that is in the Arctic. And so it's really important to get on the ground and study these ecosystems.
Our Alaskan experience is very different than what most people think of as Alaska. This being my third season out here in the Delta and the final year of all of the project as well. For me, this is a very bittersweet summer. I am looking forward to having my summers back and being able to have more normal life again, but it is sad knowing that this is the last time that we'll be out here like this. Definitely spending a lot of time trying to cherish the last moments, the last saunas, and last time getting to experience what it's like being out here at the Taco.
Happy birthday, dear Ryan. Happy birthday to you. Yay!
It was pretty smoky in here, and we couldn't really figure out until somebody saw, like, yeah, the floor is on fire. But now we have extra drainage, so.
Here's a look at the sea ice edge today as analyzed by our sea ice experts. So you can always get the very latest from them. People like Chris working hard to keep you safe and give you all the information you need at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. You can see the main concentration is very near, if not right at, St. Paul. There is ice in St. Paul Harbor, as we understand. And St. George, strips of ice, really not all that far away, and it's becoming a little more likely that the higher concentration ice here, above 80% in coverage, will get very close to, if not all the way to, St. George. Strips of ice will continue to be likely. One thing that is changing, though, is the amount of ice in Bristol Bay. You can see the decreased concentration here across Bristol Bay with temperatures warming up. Even though sea surface temperatures are not really that warm just yet, the little bit of difference is rapidly changing conditions here in Bristol Bay. So watch for a lot of changes if that's your area of concern. Same goes for Cook Inlet, too. The amount of high concentration ice here shown in white is becoming more and more limited. So anytime you want, take a look at the maps on weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. You can zoom in and look at some of these higher detailed areas and make your very best decisions, and even give the folks an email or a call if you've got observations or questions about what you're seeing. Here's a look at southeast. As I said, winds are coming up anywhere from 20 to 35 knots sustained across the inside waters, 4 to 10 foot seas as you head down to the south. The outer coast is going to bear the brunt here. Storm force winds are expected for many locations. 45 knots outside of the Dixon entrance with 23 foot seas, 24 foot seas a little bit further up the coast towards Sitka, and then a broad east to westerly flow coming off of Yakutat and out of Cross Sound, 22 to 23 foot seas there, again with higher gusts upwards around 65 knots. Conditions improve on Thursday, so if you can hold out just a little bit. Southeasterlies for the central and southern parts of the inner channels, 25 knots up around Lynn Canal, 3 foot seas there. Southeasterlies across the outer coast, and 12 foot seas in many areas across the coastline there on Thursday for southeast. Again, conditions improve greatly over Wednesday. North and easterly winds for the northern and western Gulf, 50 knots or storm force winds outside of Prince William Sound, 21 foot seas, 6 foot seas on the inside, 16 to 19 foot seas across the western Gulf approaching Kodiak Island, northeasterlies on either side of the Barrens, and northerlies in Cook Inlet. We've got our sea forecast back for the northern sections there as the ice continues to wane away. 6 foot seas there, 13 foot seas in Chillicothe Strait. For Thursday, winds stay up across the western Gulf, but they're still not as mean as what we saw in southeast a moment ago. Easterlies for Prince William Sound with a 6 foot sea, northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet with seas to 7 feet, Easterlies across the Barren Islands, 13 to 18-foot seas there, and 14-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait with a northeasterly flow. Southeasterlies coming in from the Gulf. For Wednesday, across Bristol Bay, northwesterlies with 5-foot seas there. Freezing spray just south of the ice edge. Again, that will be an issue for a while. Northwesterlies with a 10-foot sea and 40 knots on the Pacific coast with 12 to 14-foot seas and higher gusts. The gusts should start to diminish a bit on Thursday. Northerlies across Bristol Bay with a 5-foot sea, 12-foot seas on the Pacific coast, and 9-foot seas down the Bering Sea coast with that northwesterly wind. For the central and eastern chain, winds are considerably less nasty as you get out toward the west. Again, under a very weak area of high pressure, we get 15 to 20 across Adak all the way out toward Nikolsky. Northwesterlies from Nikolsky to Unalaska, 30 to 35, and westerlies on about 25 knots or so with a 5 to 6 foot sea. Now that becomes a little stronger as we get into Thursday. Westerlies continue for most of the central and eastern chain, 15 to 25 in most areas, 30 knots on the Pacific coast with 8 to 10 foot seas, and west and southwesterlies build across the western chain, 30 knots with a 14 to 16 foot sea from Kiska westward. Across the west coast, north and westerly winds will rule the day, 25 to 30 knots there. Freezing sprays an issue, 2-foot seas in the open waters around St. Matthew, 5-foot seas in the open waters around St. Paul and St. George. Northwesterlies a little stronger near the coast. Not a lot of change on Thursday. Northerlies around St. Lawrence Island, and 3 to 5-foot seas in the open waters from St. Matthew to St. Paul and St. George. Again, ice updates available anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. For the Beaufort Seacoast, stronger winds there and blowing snow advisories continue, 35 knots from the east with stronger gusts. North and westerly winds coming down the Chukchi coast, 15 to 25. For Thursday, winds diminish somewhat there in the Chukchi, while winds also lessen a little bit in the Beaufort Seacoast, but still blowing at 25 to 30 from the east. So watch for a continuation of the blowing snow advisories from the Fairbanks Weather Service office. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure across the Gulf with rain and wind and a high wind warning across the outer southern coast there. The wind warning will continue through tomorrow morning. Up north, we're watching a strong wind move through the Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley. Watch for strong and gusty winds up to 40 miles per hour in the interior and blowing snow in the north. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.